We're halfway through the 2024 NFL season now, which means it's time for a mid-season quarterback tier list. I made a quarterback tier list before the season, but this one's going to be a bit different. In that tier list, I was merely saying how good I think each quarterback is. But instead, this tier list will be an evaluation of how good each quarterback has performed thus far this season. So for example, obviously Patrick Mahomes is an S-tier quarterback, but he hasn't played like it this season, so he won't be up there. I hope that makes sense. Without wasting any more time, we're going to be going in alphabetical order by team, starting with Arizona's Kyler Murray. I think Kyler's been more or less how you'd expect Kyler to be. He's produced well, and he's done a good job protecting the football, with just 3 interceptions on the year, but he hasn't really done anything spectacular either. I think B tier sounds right for Murray, but it is worth noting that he has the Cardinals of all teams sporting a winning record. Now on to Kirk Cousins, and outside of 2 4-touchdown games against the Buccaneers, he's been a little bit underwhelming this season. But of course it wouldn't be fair to just disregard his 2 best games, and being able to dominate your division rival like that is not a bad thing by any means. I think Kirk belongs on the lower end of A tier. Now we have Lamar, and let's be real, there's nothing to talk about here. He has been the best quarterback in the league so far. I mean, the guy has 20 passing touchdowns to just 2 interceptions, and that's not even factoring in what he does on the ground. At this rate, I wouldn't be surprised if he wins another MVP. Now for Josh Allen, and the biggest knock on Allen has always been his turnovers. But he has just 2 interceptions on the year, while still producing just about as much as normal. I don't think I have to say much else, he's been playing at an S-tier level as well. Although I will put him a tad behind Lamar. I don't think I really have to say much about Bryce Young. Andy Dalton is a little trickier to rank, because he did have a few solid performances, but I think there's a reason he's not a starting quarterback. I think he's definitely on the higher end of D tier, but still D tier nonetheless. Now Caleb Williams is tricky to rank because he really juiced his stats against bad teams to a degree that puts Dak Prescott to shame, and that's saying something. I don't want to discredit his good games, but he's had far too many bad games whenever he plays a good defense. I think he fits comfortably in C tier. Now for Joe Burrow, and he has also looked dominant this season, which makes the Bengals' 4-5 record all the more disappointing. I mean, if a guy has 20 touchdown passes to 4 interceptions halfway through the year, you have no excuse to be losing that many games. Now for Deshaun Cosby. And I love that I can put him in F tier without even needing to factor in all the off-field stuff. Now Jameis Winston I think is very much in the same tier as Andy Dalton. A much more volatile Andy Dalton. I don't think he's horrible, but if he's your starting quarterback, I think you're in trouble. Now for Dak Prescott, and he unfortunately got hurt. I'm pretty sure he'll be out for a couple weeks. But even before that, he has not looked good this season, and the Cowboys' record reflects it. I'm just going to go ahead and put Dak in C tier, and honestly I'm putting him below Caleb Williams. Now for Bo Nix, and he's really hard to rank because he was truly awful his first couple games. So while improvement was certainly a low bar, he has definitely improved as of late. And he actually has twice as many total touchdowns as interceptions. I still don't think he's great, but honestly I've been more impressed with him than Caleb Williams. Now for Jared Goff, and he's another guy that's been playing like one of the best quarterbacks in the league this season. The only reason I'm hesitant to put him in S tier is because compared to the other guys up there, he hasn't really had to do a whole lot. He hasn't been putting up the same gaudy stats, but he's been ultra efficient, and for that reason alone I have to put him up there. Now for Malik Willis, and in his 2 starts he looked like a completely different quarterback than he was in Tennessee. I'm not going to overreact, and with small sample size combined with a game plan that involved running the ball, I still don't think he's a crazy good quarterback, but he looked very serviceable, and I'm going to put him in C tier. Now where to put Jordan Love? He certainly has the production to be an A or S tier quarterback, but the turnovers definitely need to be taken into account. I think it would be underrating him to have him any lower than A tier, but I'm going to put him on the lower end just because he's more turnover prone than you'd like. Now on to CJ Stroud, and he's having another solid year, although he doesn't look quite as spectacular as he did his rookie year. What's interesting about Stroud is that he's put up a few stinkers in games, and outside of that he's been very good, but it seems like there's no in-between. He either balls out or he just flat out sucks. I think so far this season he's deserving of a high B tier, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if he winds up better than that by the end of the year. Now for Anthony Richardson, and I hate to do it, but 44% completion percentage. I think that's all I need to say, really. Hopefully he turns it around, but for now he's on the bench. And now for the guy who replaced him, Joe Flacco. The fact that Joe Flacco in the year 2024 is a viable starting quarterback is awesome. It would feel a little absurd to put him in the same tier as guys like CJ Stroud and Kyler Murray, so I'm just gonna sit him comfortably at the top of C tier. Now for Trevor Lawrence, and for all the Jaguars' flaws, Lawrence doesn't really seem to be one of them. He looked bad the first couple weeks, but since then he's turned it around. I think the bottom of B tier is perfect for him. And now for Patrick Mahomes. And as I alluded to earlier, he certainly hasn't been playing like the Patrick Mahomes we know. I think I'm just going to go ahead and give him the benefit of the doubt and put him in the top of A tier. Now we've got Aiden O'Connell, and he's going in F tier, although I don't think he's been as actively terrible as anyone else here. Gardner Minshew's been a bit disappointing. He's had a few good performances, but they've been few and far between, and overall he has more interceptions than touchdowns. I still think he's better than guys like Andy Dalton and Jameis Winston, but he's definitely going in D tier. Now for Justin Herbert, and much like Jared Goff, he hasn't been putting up crazy numbers, but he's been very efficient, only throwing 1 interception all season so far. And for that, I think he belongs at the top of A tier. Up next is Matthew Stafford, and he's been having an up and down season. He hasn't put up great stats, and he hasn't been very efficient either, turning the ball over more than you'd like. But it's fair to pin some of the blame on missing his top 2 receivers. I'm just going to drop him at the bottom of B tier. Now we got Tyler Huntley, who won a game for the Dolphins somehow, but there's not a whole lot to say here. I'm dropping him right in the middle of F tier. Now Tua's really tough to rank because he missed a lot of games, but even when he's been on the field, he hasn't been spectacular. He's gone 1-3 with the only win being against the Jaguars, and his stats aren't anything to write home about either. But he's still been pretty efficient when he's been on the field, with a completion percentage above 72, so I think that's enough to sneak him up into B tier. Now we've got Sam Darnold. If I told you before the year that Sam Darnold would have 17 touchdowns to 7 interceptions, you'd probably think, okay, well he had a better year than I thought. No, that's halfway through the year. Crazy stuff. Sam Darnold's going at the top of A tier. A sentence I never thought would leave my mouth. Now for Jacoby Brissett, and I was honestly a little underwhelmed by him, if that's even possible. He didn't turn the ball over a lot, but that's about where the positives end. He's going at the bottom of D tier. Drake May, on the other hand, looks to have brought some life to the Patriots offense, and while he hasn't looked perfect, I think he's comfortably at the upper end of C tier. Although it's worth noting he has a smaller sample size than fellow rookies Bo Nix and Caleb Williams. Speaking of small sample sizes, up next we have Spencer Rattler. He had a pretty brutal 3 starts, and for that I have to drop him in F tier. Now for Derek Carr, and he's put up decent stats in the games he's played. I think he's done enough to warrant being put in B tier, although, fair or not, I think we know who Derek Carr is at this point, and I wouldn't be surprised if he drops by the end of the year. Now for Drew Lock, and as far as I know, he hasn't played a snap for the Giants yet, so not a lot to say here. Now for Daniel Jones, and at least statistically, he hasn't been quite as atrocious as you'd expect, but this is still Daniel Jones we're talking about. I'm gonna put him at the top of D tier, and honestly, I'm surprised he's even that high. Now for Aaron Rodgers, and he's having a decent statistical season, but all the Jets games I've watched have really shown how inconsistent he is. He's put up the stats to be higher, but I still think B tier is the highest I can put him. Now for Jalen Hurts, he's performed better than I thought this year, or at least that's what his stats indicate. The Eagles haven't looked like a dominant team, but they're 6-2, and I think Jalen Hurts and his 18 total touchdowns are deserving of A tier. Now for Justin Fields, and as a Fields non-believer, he was pretty good when he played for the Steelers. He was a little more than a game manager, but I thought he'd be too turnover prone to do that, and he proved me wrong. I'll put him in C tier, but he looked solid. Now for Russell Wilson, and with a small sample size, I can't really rank him too high, but the Steelers' offense seems to have come alive with him under center. And if you can make the Steelers' offense do something, you have to be playing pretty good. You could say it's too high for the small sample size, but I'm gonna put him in B tier. Now Brock Purdy has certainly looked shaky this year. I'm sure the Brock Purdy system quarterback crowd is having a field day right now. I'm not gonna overreact too much, but honestly I think Kyler Murray has looked better than Purdy this season. Now on to Geno Smith, who still leads the league in passing yards. And while his touchdown numbers look low, that's misleading. Because while the Seahawks criminally underutilized their run game, sitting at 29th in rushing attempts, they're 7th in the league in rushing touchdowns, taking away from Geno's passing totals. But while that can be used to explain his low touchdown count, it doesn't excuse the turnovers. Tied with Jordan Love, Geno Smith leads the league in interceptions right now with 10. And on top of that, he simply hasn't shown up in big games. So despite his great production, I really don't feel like I can put him any higher than the middle of B tier. Now for Baker Mayfield, and while he turns the ball over more than you'd like, it's Baker that leads the league in touchdown passes with 23. Not Lamar Jackson, not Josh Allen, not Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield. The dude is lighting it up, and it would be disrespectful to put him any lower than S tier. He's been playing like a top tier quarterback this season. Now Will Levis, not a lot to say there. Mason Rudolph, not a lot to say there either. And finally we have Jaden Daniels. And where to put Jaden Daniels? For how electric the Washington offense has been this season, I feel like it would surprise some people that he still only has single-digit touchdown passes. Although that can easily be explained away by the Commanders having the 3rd most rushing touchdowns in the league. Make no mistake, Jaden Daniels has been nothing short of spectacular, but he hasn't put up the crazy numbers to warrant putting him in S tier, so I'm gonna sit him right at the top of A tier. Not bad for a rookie. So there's my tier list. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, and I'll be making another quarterback tier list at the end of the season. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and be sure to check out my last quarterback tier list if you're curious about my thoughts before the season started.